So the first thing is, on page 59, the question for discussion is, what are our difficulties with time? But my first reaction to this is, look at the name of the drawing. Old man with hourglass. That's not an old man. That's middle age. Used to be old.
In 1717, he was old.
That's right.
By today's standards.
Yep. See, so times have changed. So the first thing we know about time is that they are a-changing. Okay, what's our problem with time? Why do we need to understand what time is? Who has time for this? So there are so many frustrations with time. Like, you never have enough time. Or time passes too quickly. Or too slowly. Where did the time go? The main problem is that if I did something and I regret it, I can't fix it. I can't go back in time, which almost everybody needs to do. I invested in a stock. I want to take it back. I bet on a horse. I want to take it back. I can't. Too late. That's a real frustration. Some people are frustrated about the future. Since we don't know what the future is going to bring, it makes us anxious. Anticipatory anxiety. I'm not even sure what I'm worried about, just the fact that I don't know what's going to happen. I can't control. So here's the main issue, the serious issue, not the philosophical games. I'm not in control of the past or of the future. And that's uncomfortable, scary, whatever. So we seem to be under the control of time. We have no control over time. So there is, on page 61, that famous little poem that's also a Mordechai Ben David song. And it basically says, Ha'over ayin. The past is gone. The ha'osid adayin. The future isn't yet. The ha'heve, the present, is keheref ayin, only lasts a second. Imkein da'ago menayin. So what are we worried about? So let's do that again. The past is gone, the future is yet to come, and the present is like the blink of an eye, so what's to worry? You agree with that?
Yeah, in theory.
Isn't that exactly what we're worried about?
Well, we're here to find out how we could live with this.
Right, so this is not comforting. This is the problem. The problem is the past is gone. I can't fix it or undo it. And the future, I don't know. And the present, it disappears in a second. Come on, that's a lot of anxiety. So what's to worry? That's to worry. So it can go either way. How does it go positively? The past is gone, so what do you want? It's done. It's finished. Move on. The future, it hasn't happened yet. What do you have to worry now that something, you'll burn your bridges when you get there. What is that? You'll cross that bridge when you get there. Then you'll burn your bridge. And the present, it's only a second, so it only will hurt for a second. Comforting, so what's to worry about? They both make sense, which means it doesn't make any sense at all. If you can argue both ways equally, then you basically haven't said anything. So it could be this, and it could be the opposite. In other words, you haven't said anything. We know nothing. So now the question is, at least philosophically, what is the present? What's present? In a second, it becomes the past. So they start with a question: how do we know that there is a past? Maybe everything began just now. But I remember yesterday. Yeah, that memory was just created now. There was nothing before. We are created now with memories of things that never happened. So all reality begins now. Isn't that a fascinating question? No. It's like splitting hairs unnecessarily. If there is no past, everything just began now, then a minute from now, what I'm thinking now is not going to be real anymore. So this is just silly. Time is made up of past, present, and future. If there's no past, then there's no present. If there's no present, there's no future. You can't have one without the other or two without the third. But the question mainly is not about the past. We know. We had a long life. Many things happened. There's a long history before us. That's the past. The future can go on forever. But what is the present? What good is it? It's just a second. So, quoting from the Ikrim, and I'll read it in English: time is something that does not actually exist. The past isn't here anymore. The future has not yet come into actuality. The present is just the now that connects past and future. So the now itself is not really a part of time. Can you call the present time?
Just for that moment.
For that moment, it is time?
It's always not past or future. But there's got to be a now.
There's got to be. Yeah, there has to be.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do anything.
Although, if there wasn't a now, how do we move from past to future?
Isn't it just a continuum? Like we're just moving and with the time?
That's part of the question of the nature of time. We'll get to that in a minute. So now itself is not really a part of time. Rather, its relationship to time is like the relationship of a point in a line. So time doesn't really exist. And yet time provides the full existence to everything that exists in time. I love this double talk. It's supposed to be brilliant. Yeah. So what he's saying is that the present is the bridge between, so it itself is not time. It's an interesting thought. And it's going to be relevant later on. The present is really timeless, because time means change. The present means what is, not what changes. So imagine if time stopped. What would we have? Only the present. Right? Time stopped means it's not going to move into the future. So what will we be left with? The present. So after Mashiach comes, or after Tchias HaMesim, there's going to be a change in the world, and we're going to live forever. Why? Because it will be continual or perpetual present. There will be no future, because it's not going to change. So the present, although it's only a second, is not really time. It's what is. It's not what's changing. The change is from past to future. But in between past and future, there's a stable little second that isn't changing. It's the present. And that's why you should live in the present moment. Don't live in the past and don't worry about the future, because they're just changes. The present is the reality. Although you can also argue, as he says here, that the present is nothing, just a little bridge. So again, which way do we go? Is it nothing, merely a bridge, or is it the reality or the stability of time, whereas past and present are in flux and unstable? Okay. Can anything exist outside of time? Can there be existence without time? Can the moon exist without time?
No.
Because
Based
just-
on time.
You just said that the reality is the present, which is time, so there isn't. Right.
so there is.
I forgot your question, but the answer was no.
Who cares what the question was? We got the answer. Stop living in the past. Can the moon exist without time? Or in different words, can space exist without time?
I don't think so, because isn't it time that makes things rotate, day and night and
Yeah.
I was going to say like the opposite. It's because the world is turning that there's time. Outside of the world, I mean, on the world, it's every time of the day somewhere in the whole world. It's like all of time is happening only in the world. Outside the world, I was thinking like when you asked, is there anything beyond time? I was thinking, well, before birth and after death, there's no time. But those neshamas are still in existence, even though they're not in this time. That's what I was thinking.
That's a good point. Is there time in heaven? Is there a heavenly time? Obviously, it's not an earthly time. But is there a spiritual form of time?
You would think so.
When
If
a
you
shaman
take
should come down.
responsibility, then-
yeah. Yeah. You know, when
So if
when
time
you hear that
stopped-
people like spiritually pass away, like they die, and then some miracle happens, and then
Come back.
they like something comes into their says it's not time for you to die, and then they come back to life. So there's
Somebody's keeping time up there
yeah.
in the celestial clock.
But it doesn't feel the same.
No, it doesn't feel the same. Because spiritual is different than physical. So if time stopped, would everything disappear?
Even time is just because of the world, no?
How could time
Goes
stop?
hand in hand.
Time stopped at a moment.
Get a cheap watch.
Right?
Hmm?
Time stopped for Yeshua.
The sun
The
stopped.
sun stopped, so time stopped. So
Um,
no. What do you mean?
Yeah,
Is there
things were still going on.
But aging still happened, the process.
is there time without the
In
sun?
that time space.
Right.
In that
It
one
was just
time
day, it
zone.
was day.
So there was a shift in time.
Was
Like the day lasted longer than the night or something, right?
But it didn't move.
The,
So
the
there
sun
was-
didn't
It
move.
was a present for a very long
Yeah,
time.
yeah, okay. So you can stop time and things still exist. Actually, he stopped time and time went on.
Like you said, like in the times of Mashiach, we'll be in the present. Time's gonna stop. We'll all be in the present, but things will happen.
So that little piece of wisdom, you have to live in the moment. Is that because the moment is going to pass quickly, or because the moment is all we have? So if we had a moment that lasts a year,
Amazing.
you should live in that moment, right? Nothing will change for a year, and you're okay with that?
No, I think it just means to be fully aware. Be aware of that moment.
That takes a lot of
So-
practice, a lot of focusing on breathing.
Because if that moment doesn't seem good, then we wouldn't want to sit in that moment forever. But that's the
You
scary
want
part.
you don't want to be stuck in a bad moment, huh? You say something?
You don't give up your ability to choose an act right now because of the future. You rely on the future. It's like using it as a crutch. You know, it's not walking straight. Walking straight is you do now because how can you rely on the future to rescue you?
Okay.
You have is now.
Yeah. So the real issue is free choice. That's what makes time valuable. After Mashiach comes or after Tchias HaMesim, there really won't be that kind of free choice. There'll be only good. So there won't be any change or movement from negative to positive. That kind of time will disappear. But let's see. Look at text 6.
1 second, so the only benefit of the present is free choice, is that what you just said? Or one of the great benefits is the choice to change?
That's the benefit of time, past, present, and future.
Don't change the past.
That's what we're going to find out. Hayesed Haravi, the Rambam says, the fourth principle that we believe in is the fact that God is primordial. The belief that God is absolutely primordial and all other existences are not similarly primordial. What does primordial mean in English? Huh?
The root,
Primary,
from the beginning,
Or
the root.
primordial is related to like before time. The primordial soup, that's the tohu vabohu.
So what is it in Hebrew? It's called kadmon.
Prime order.
Nothing came before.
So what does this mean, like,
There was nothing before God. So God's existence,
full of what?
so the first existence is,
yeah, but the point of being the first existence is that there was nothing before.
This
In other words,
the
it-
13 principles, is the
No.
fourth principle in 13? What's
No, this is a different set of principles, and God is without time, right? There was no before, and there's no after. But what exactly is time, and how did it begin? How does time start?
far out.
So there are some philosophers, scientists, philosophers, maybe even Newton, who believe that time is a reality in and of itself. In time, things happen. Similar to the belief that space is an ether, like a soup. And in that soup there are planets, and they move around in the ether. There are people who, Einstein said there's no such thing. According to Einstein, what is outer space? What is empty space? Empty space is the effect that a planet has for some distance around itself. It's like the energy that a planet, that a mass gives off. You take the planet away, there's no space. Right? So space means the vibrations of the presence of a mass.
Is that E equals MC squared? Is that theory, or is that something else?
I have no idea.
That's what he's
That's something
There's
else.
a relationship.
Is it? Because he had
Einstein's
something
mind.
about time and space, yes.
He's talking about that it's relative. In other words, what space is there? Well, it depends on if you're on that planet. If that planet is there, it's relative. So if you'd be on Mars, then it'll be relative to Mars. Which, by the way, I found out that's different, but I'm not going to do that why.
How
But
long
E
did it
equals
take to
MC
get there?
squared is an equation that expresses Einstein's theory that energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Therefore, mass is convertible to energy when you bring in the factor of the speed of light squared. Then you can convert mass to energy. And that is how, unfortunately, these terrible weapons were developed, which isn't what he wanted. Sorry about this. But it's all within his mind. It was his idea that the whole universe is one. He had this belief in optics.
So what is the consequence of his theory of space?
Relative.
That the entire universe is finite. There are only so many masses or objects. When the objects end, space ends. Whereas if you believe that there's some kind of ether into which the planets flow, how big is that ether? Goes on forever? Then the universe has no shape, has no end. But according to Einstein, because space is the product of things, and there are only so many things, the entire universe is finite. So the same can be said of time. Is time just an existence? And into that existence, things happen? So things happen in time, but time goes on anyway, whatever. Or time is the event itself. When something happens, that causes a past, it already happened, it causes the present, and since it's moving or it's happening, something is going to happen next. So is time an independent existence, or is time the result of an activity? Take a look at text 8. God created time. When did he create time? How long did, how much time did it take to create time? Is God still creating time? Because time goes on. So the first moment where God created time must have been an almost infinite potential of time. He created the first moment, and that contains everything, all of time. And now we're watching as that time unfolds. But there was that one moment of like massive time, and now we're seeing it play itself out. But take a look at text 8. Let's read the Hebrew. V'to'anu ha'kefrim, the atheists argue be'inyan brias ha'olam, concerning creation, and they say מפני מה לא ברא הבורא לפני הזמן אשר ברא? Why didn't God create the world before he created it? 5,700, why not 5,800? כי חשבו שיש מוקם לשאלה זו, and they considered this a valid question. והשחילו לחלק עשו, and they began to ridicule it, and they said, maybe he created it when he did misibas hamtona. He was waiting for something. Or maybe something was stopping him. They're ridiculing the idea of belief in God. But what is the truth? They didn't realize they didn't realize that the question itself is nonsense. Because when you say God created time, then you can't ask what happened before that. Before he created time, there was no before. All before and after is what God created. So when you're asking, why didn't God create time before time, it's a nonsense question. Text 9 from the Tzemach Tzedek. Like everything else God created, time is a creation. Hazman hu nivra, time is a creation. Something new brought into being out of nothingness, like all creation. Only God is timeless, for God is utterly beyond time, even of time as an incalculable expanse. Rather, the whole of time is in the continual present for him.
I don't understand the last sentence. The whole of time is a continual present for him, so meaning because he's beyond time, he can hop around from present to future.
And it's all present.
And it's all present for him.
What we're going to find out is that there are two aspects of time. There are the separate, distinct moments of time, and there is the flow of time. Just like there's a line you make with your pencil, it's a continuous line, but if you look under a microscope, it's made up of dots. You can't just make a line. You have to make many, many, many dots that create the line. So an hour is one unit, but you can break that hour down to minutes, and then seconds, and then nanoseconds. So here's a good question. God created space. Understandable. You want to have a world? You got to have space. Why did he create time? Particularly if after Tchias HaMesim, when the world becomes perfect, there won't be time in the same way. So why create it?
I guess the free choice.
Yeah.
Comes down to that.
And what does free choice really mean?
That we have command over our present.
How do you use your time?
God created the world so that it exists, but he had a purpose. He had a plan, which means he wants something to happen in the world. Because he wants something to happen, that creates time. In other words, he created grass, but not for it to just remain grass. He created the grass to feed the animal. So something has to change. The grass has to become animal. He created the animal not just to have animal, he created the animal to serve the human. to provide for the human. And he created the human to actually change the world. So where do we see time mentioned in the beginning of creation?
In the beginning.
Huh?
In the beginning.
When he said today is Yom Rishon and tomorrow is Yom Sheni.
It was the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a beginning, there has to be an end.
Right. So the first word itself, Bereshis, has so much meaning. You can write a whole book on it. One of the meanings of Bereshis is for a purpose. God created the world with a purpose. What does it mean, a purpose? For something to happen. That's where time comes in. So if God was content with the world as it is, there would be no need for time. He created earth. Earth is perfect. Great. What do you need time for? So time comes as a result of intention or purpose or kavanah. People get depressed from time. No one ever gets depressed from space. In fact, the psychologists say the worst, most dangerous condition is when people have free time. We don't know how to handle free time. That's why during holidays, the hospitals are much busier. You would think when people go to work, there'll be accidents, they'll get hurt at the job. So the hospital should be more busy during the workday. But it's not. It's much busier during holiday. Because people are not good at handling time. Why is that? Space doesn't demand choices or activity or changes. Time demands change. A minute went by, what did you do? Why do I have to do anything? Because time is moving. You lost that time. So if an hour goes by and you didn't do anything, you start to feel guilty. Subconsciously. Consciously, you're thrilled. You can be a couch potato. I don't have to do anything. I get the whole day off. And by the end of the day, you're depressed. Because time went on and you didn't. So the whole point of time is change. Change means progress. Progress means purpose. Purpose means fulfilling the reason for which you exist. If you're not fulfilling the reason for which you exist, but time goes on, now you're being harassed by the passing of time. So again, where did time come from? The fact that God has a purpose. So again, God created space so that there's a world, and he created time so that the world would accomplish something. Well, it's the other way around. Because God wants the world to accomplish something, that's why there is time. There is before and after. God puts that time into our hands in Bereshis, where it says, be fruitful and multiply, prurevu, milu es haaretz, fill the world, vikivshuha, and master it. Fill the world means space. Master the world means time. So God gives us time and space and makes it ours, our responsibility. What should we do with space? Fill it Be fruitful and multiply. What should I do with time? Master it. Harness the world and make something out of it. That's time. Changes. As we will see, since God gave us time, in other words, gave us power over time, we can actually affect the past and we can affect the future. Based on the fact that God is creating the world constantly. When we realize God is creating the world constantly, like in text 10, HaMachadesh betuvei b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereishis. God didn't create the world once and then set it into perpetual motion. He has to create the world constantly.
I want to ask a question, I'm sorry. You said, since God gave us power over time, we can actually affect the past and the future. How can we affect the past? We can only affect our perspective of the past. We could possibly affect the future, but
How?
by doing things differently than the way it was done in the
So
past.
maybe learning from the past, learning from the past?
Well, if the past has a certain outcome, if the outcome of the present, if you change the outcome of the present or in the future, then the outcome of the past events changes. The purpose of those
That makes
events
sense.
changes.
I don't understand how we can actually affect the past other than
Okay.
our perspective on it.
All right.
Because
Because-
those events
And also-
choose
It's
present.
like tshuva, yeah?
Yeah. And by the same
Form.
by the same token, can we really affect the future?
Well,
If I
say-
act
so-
different-
So say you go to work every single day. On Monday, you accidentally forgot your lunch. So Monday evening you'll say, tomorrow I will remember my lunch. So you affect the future by doing it differently the next day,
Planning.
That's affecting the future, but like.
But what if I say tomorrow I will not forget my lunch, but I forget my lunch? So all I'm changing is the present. All I'm affecting. I'm affecting the present. Now I'm thinking,
Unless you're conscious and you remember it.
yeah, now I'm thinking clearly. What's going to be tomorrow? I don't know. I forget again. So do my plans today really affect tomorrow?
Yeah.
We
No.
try.
We try, but no.
Your mind is affected. I mean, you'll feel more guilty because you forgot a second time. But
Yes,
Your
your plans
plans
definitely,
definitely,
how
your
am I
plans, they
gonna
definitely affect.
I think our
Understand
mind
history
today
very
is affected by
differently.
that plan that we're worried about tomorrow.
that's
So that's sort of a
perspective.
different reality of the past.
But that's that's a perspective.
That-
That's
not
just a
necessarily.
perspective.
Okay, so
It's
let's-
not actually affecting you.
So let's change it.
It's a different
Not-
reality of that past, because history is that, and then tomorrow it's something.
Not that I intend not to forget. I prepared tomorrow's lunch. Will that affect the future?
Stick it in your briefcase and hang your briefcase by the front door.
I mean, you might forget your briefcase or something.
Right.
Yeah, you might forget your briefcase, but you created food for that day. You created food for the future. So
What is God doing when He's recreating the world every moment? Is He trying to control the future? Is he, we don't really control our destiny.
He's giving us free
right?
choice.
But we try to invest in the future by like setting, we don't try to plan not to fail, So we could just follow the example, I guess, of God.
Is that how we're created in God's image?
So let's take a look. Text 10 says God is constantly recreating the world. Since the world consists of time and space, it means God is constantly recreating time. What does that do for us? Look at figure back on page 68. The name Havaya, Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei, has the letters of all three. It was, is, and will be. Haya, the Hey, the Yud, and the Hey is was. past. Hey and a vav and a hey is heveh, which means present. And the whole name together with the yud in the beginning is will be. So in the word yud kei, in the letters yud kei vav kei, you have past, present, and future. And we refer to God by that name, saying that he is all three, which can mean that he is involved in time, or because he's all three, he's beyond time.
Three is time. Oh,
That's just a name.
yeah.
So, what do we gain by understanding that God is creating the world all the time? Take a look at text 11.
Second, something just interesting happened. She said it is time, and you said it's just a name, but we know that the name is the essence of a person, right? So maybe
It touches the essence.
touches the essence. Maybe
But of course, a person can exist without a name. So it's not the person. A nameless person is still, the John Doe is still a,
And it says renews.
yeah.
That renews implies that that it's not something brand new in our perspective, that it's renewed. So it's has a different flavor.
The idea in the simple meaning is he created it, but he's creating it again. But creation means something new that didn't exist before. So it's not describing the creation, it's describing the creator. It's like he is doing it again. He's acting again. He's doing the same thing again. But the world that he creates is brand new. Well, let's see. Text 11. This is from the Shaloh. Shaloh, the letters Shin Lamed Hey, stands for Shnei Luchos Habris. That was the Sefer, which interestingly, completely off topic, when the author named his Sefer the 10 Commandments, Shnei Luchos Habris, it was held against him. How can you call your Sefer, right? And he suffered for it. There was another Sefer where the author his name was Moshe, and he named his Sefer Teiras Moshe. That was a bit too ambitious, and it was held against him. And I think even the Rambam called his Sefer Mishnah Torah, and that's, again, too close to
The real thing.
the real thing. So. There was one day, Adin Steinsaltz was by dollars, I believe, and the Rebbe said to him, completely without warning, the name Steinsaltz, it sounds very harsh. Stein means stone, Salz means salt. It's hard, it's harsh. You should change your name to something more pleasant. And obviously he was stunned because the last name, the family name, is not that meaningful that it makes any difference. Some people say that Rebbe suggested Friedman. Or Friedman, like a happy person, like something positive.
Did he ever change it? No.
Evan Yisrael, which is a bit of an improvement. It's still stone, right? So there was this, everybody was wondering, puzzled. See, it turns out he had just translated the Gemara, and it was called the Steinsaltz Talmud. And the Rebbe was saying, you can't take it back, so stop being Steinsaltz. See, the art scroll was called what is it called? Their translation of the Talmud. Yeah. The Schottenstein edition. Right? It wasn't called the Schottenstein Talmud. But this was called Steinsaltz Talmud. So anyway, that could be the reason. So, in the Shalah, he writes like this. And by the way, part of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says, it's based on what I learned and what I read. One of the things that he read was the Shalah. The other is the Maharal of Prague. So he says like this. Hine svaras ha'olam hikach. People think as follows. Habeira baruch hu chidesh hakel yesh me'ayin hamuchlat. God created everything out of absolute nothing. Bereshis nosan hakadosh baruch hu litzvah hashamayim keyach v'yecheles lahaneg ha'olam. And early on, God gave the planets the power to conduct the earth. Ha'olam keminhagei neheg. And now the world is following the influence of the planets, of the Okeviyachol zozo yode mehem. And they assume that God is no longer involved in running the world. Rak im le'es ha'itim reitze lishded esam, unless on occasion God wants to change something, then he interferes. V'cholzman she'enim meshadid, but as long as he's not interfering, ozman higam b'keach shehusag lehem be'es habriya. Then the stars, what is it called? What are they called? The astrological system.
Astrology.
The galaxy?
The
Astronomy.
heavenly bodies, right, are running the world. Omnam amitas ha'amuna, but the truth is, Hashem yizbarich machadesh betuve b'chol yem talmud ma'aseh bereishis. God has to renew everything in creation constantly, bekavona mechuvenes shefei ashifei, and he is doing it with intention and with purpose. Ve'ilu haya meinei rega echad, and if he would stop for a second, haya hakel keloi haya, all that exists would not exist. Botel hametzius, there would be nothing.
So if God's constantly renewing the world, can he make it so that mistakes that we made in the past can be, you may notice like tshuva, mistakes could be
Yep. What are the consequences?
negated, like fixed?
What are the consequences of this fact? If God is creating the world anew every second, the first thing that we get from that is we are not enslaved by the past. In that poem where it says the past is gone, it doesn't exist. Why? Because you can't control it? No. Because the world today is an entirely new world. It was recreated out of nothing. In the new world, there are new possibilities. You're not enslaved by the past. In fact, that's exactly what time means. Time means change. What is change? Not what was, something new. Otherwise, you're not really changing. You're just dragging. You're just continuing. Change means that what was is no longer, now something different. How is it possible for something different, for you to be different than you were a moment ago? Because you were just created. It's hard to imagine, but if God is creating the world at every second, it also means that the world stops existing every second. So it's like stop, start, stop, start. So at any second, at any moment, you can say, the world just stopped. since it can't exist without being created, it has a dual personality. It is and it isn't. What does it mean it isn't? How is it possible for a person to go from being sad to being happy? Or the opposite? How do you go from being happy to being sad?
Being attached to what's happening around you, being connected to what happens around you and to you.
And then what happens when a person becomes addicted? He can't change. He can't move from one condition to another. But every healthy person, I was very, very angry. Yeah, so what happened? I moved on. So where did the anger go?
Let it go.
Where did it go?
It never existed.
It never existed. I was never really angry.
It existed plenty.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And it's about to come back in a second.
That the mindset changed. You worked on yourself to think differently. You moved away from that situation. You did something else. You took yourself away from the anger. Whatever it is, you have to do something.
Why is that possible? What makes it possible to go from one mood to another?
We have free choice.
Realizing that it's the Yetzer Hara. I think that's what I do, because I think we've learned that melancholy and
So if you were,
sadness is the Yetzer
it's a Yetzer Hara. So if you were in the Yetzer Hara, how did you get out?
Identify.
Sometimes time moves on. I just
What does that
You
mean?
made a decision, you made a choice.
So what?
sometimes you don't make sure it just
See
happens.
the situation differently, to reframe it.
So if you see the situation differently, it changes the situation?
No.
So the situation was never real?
Your view.
Well, you know that right now you have a new choice. Do I have to continue being angry, or can I do something else?
Why is that possible?
You can't change anyone else, you can only change your own behavior.
You see, while you're angry, look at this. While you're angry, if I would suggest to you, you don't have to be so angry.
That makes me angry.
Right?
You know,
I take my life in my hands.
I just have a blank expression. You look upset. Now I'm upset.
So if while you're angry, I suggest that, you don't have to be angry, that would not compute at all. I am angry. It's real. So, well, stop it. Stop it? What, anger is not real? I'm making myself angry? No, I'm angry. Say, well, think positive thoughts.
Take a deep breath.
How is it that the reality, and it really is real, I'm into anger. Okay, well, enough of that. Now get happy. Is it really? It does work. The question is, how come? What it implies is that anger has a little bit of humility to it. It allows you to disregard it. I'm like saying, chesed allows room for gvura. Otherwise, if you were chesed, you would be only chesed. If you were gvura, you would be only gvura. How is it possible to go from one to the other, or even to have a combination? Because they each allow the existence of the other. And that's called bittul. There's a certain humility to the creation itself. Without that, there would be no harmony. There'd be no movement from one to the other. Everything would be rigid and fixed. So if you're angry, you'll never be happy again. And if you're happy, you'll be giddy forever. There'd be no movement or change from one to the other. So in order for movement to be possible, there has to be a certain flexibility to creation, to reality, which is a certain humility that recognizes, as if to say, I'm not the only thing. I'm very angry. The anger itself is saying, I am anger, but I'm not the only thing in the world. So if you give me a good reason, I'll let you shift to something else. Where does that humility come from? From the fact that God has to recreate it every moment. If it exists independently, then it has no humility. It doesn't recognize a creator. If it doesn't recognize a creator, it doesn't budge. Like Pari, he wouldn't budge. He had to be broken with 10 plagues in order for him to budge, because he did not recognize a power other than his own. But in nature, see, that's a human being with his free choice. But in nature, there is a natural humility, because every second it stops existing. So how could it be rigid when it experiences its own recreation out of nothing? So a moment ago I was nothing, now I'm going to be rigid. Now I'm the only thing that exists. Doesn't? So the fact that God is recreating the world every second gives the world the ability to move, to be fluid, to switch, to change, to react. Without that, everything would be so arrogant that nothing would ever change. That's what happened in the world of chaos, in Tohu. There was a world of chaos. It was totally rigid and inflexible, and it broke. It burst, because it can't. There's got to be some flexibility.
Because it didn't recognize that it wouldn't always be, or wasn't always being created.
There was no humility in it. And it didn't leave room for its opposite. So chesed would not allow gvura. Gvura would not allow chesed. So you can't create a world. Or an orderly world.
But if the world is recreated every second for Hashem, there is no past, no future in Hashem. It's recreated every second. Then there is no change there. There is no past, there is no future. Every second it's new. The existence is only in the creation, in the moment. How is there change, past, future? Where is that? Right?
Obviously, God is above the time, and for him, it's all the same. But for us, it's not.
So in Hashem, there is no change?
The only change is in us, and that's all that he really cares about. The change in us. Now, it's interesting. I'm not sure it's necessary for our purpose, but we just quoted the Shalah says if God stops creating, everything would stop existing. Now, look, the Alter Rebbe adds one other point, which is fascinating. The Alter Rebbe says, if God stopped creating the world, it would return to nothingness. Look at the last sentence of text 12. If the letters of the 10 utterances by which the world was created during the 6 days of creation were to depart from it, but for an instant, God forbid, it would literally revert to naught and absolute nothingness, which the Shalah already said. The Alter Rebbe adds, exactly as before the 6 days of creation. Mamash. So first of all, the Rebbe says, God forbid. Notice? If God would stop creating the world, God forbid. Would it be so terrible if he stopped creating the world? I mean, really, we need this. And the Rebbe says, no, God forbid. The world is important. But what does it mean that everything would revert to nothingness exactly as it was before creation? Well, yeah, it's nothingness, right? What is this adding? It's adding something very, very significant. If everything stopped, the world disappears, nothing exists anymore, is that like before creation?
No,
Because
there was something.
because now the world doesn't exist anymore. Before creation, it never existed. So once something is, no matter what you do to it, it'll never be the same again because it will have existed. So it won't have a future and it won't have a present, but it'll have a past. It existed in the past. But you see, since time is part of creation, if God stops creating, there would be no time either. So the past would stop existing. So the world would not exist exactly as it didn't exist before it was created. It wouldn't even have been. That's a little hard to imagine, right? In other words, the presence, the object would disappear, but so would time. So there would be no past to say, well, it used to be. There would be no used to be. There would be no past.
I don't know, I'm feeling like at some point that's what's going to happen. I'm sorry to break it to everybody, but that's how I feel.
Well, that's depressing.
I feel like it's gonna happen at some point.
That's why I try to live in the present, but if I had to think about it,
I'm done with you guys.
Why does that feel right?
because at some point we're all going to go back to the original state, which was even after Mashiach comes, like we're all after, and there's phases, and it speaks about all those phases, and then the whole big idea is that we return to that godly, we become the essence of God. We return to right? If we all have that little spark, and this whole world is filled with this little sparks, it's all about revealing the spark. Then that spark, once it's revealed, becomes part of the being that it was to begin with.
And what was it to begin with?
God.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing. There's just no past, present, or future, and then it's just it's Him, and that's what it was before time, before the creation. There was no past, there was no present. Like you just said, time is part of His creation.
So we will become like Him. We will also be timeless.
Mm-hmm. Right, but there's no.
That's not so depressing anymore.
No, because the whole idea of time was created for this purpose of creation. So what happens to everything that happened in this world all these years? When the world ceased to exist the way it
It's the
You
ultimate.
understand what I'm
That's the
saying a little
goal. That's the goal. It's like what happened to the flour in your cake when you put it in there. It's no longer flour, but it's in a cake, and it becomes something different than flour.
So why did it have to be flour? Why couldn't it just be cake?
I get it.
No. Why does there have to be Golus and then there's Geula?
Because that's his
Because there was a purpose in the creation,
In the Golus.
in the gods.
Will that purpose ever completely disappear?
I think so.
So we read in the Haggadah that we will be telling the story of the of Yetzias Mitzrayim even after Mashiach comes. Why?
So the time will still exist then.
Because
And then we'll still have time then, we'll have past.
the Alter Rebbe says, I think, that after Mashiach comes, we will look back at Golus nostalgically.
I wish that we were able to do more mitzvahs.
Because there's something special about Golus, about thirsting for God compared to not being thirsty. So both are valid. And that's why the Rebbe would sing Kein Bakedesh Chazi Sicha. When everything is perfect, I hope I still feel the way I feel now. So when I miss you very much, and then you come home, is that a step down? Because I don't miss you anymore?
No, but the missing could be a lot more powerful than coming home.
Right. So I want to retain that even when you're home. So it's not a matter of past or present, it's a matter of value. There's something valuable about this that will continue forever. It will also become timeless. So the timelessness is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. And it doesn't mean we'll stop existing. Okay, so let's take a look at text 13 and we'll learn a little Aramaic. You ready for this? In case you needed a second language, here's your second language. Chad Bei Shimshi. One afternoon. Yes, makes sense? Chad is like Echad. Bei Shimshi is like Bein Hashmoshes. One evening. And what does the word Shimshi come from? Shemesh. Sunset, right? So one sunset, Chazye, he saw, who saw? Rabbi Hanina ben Deisa. He saw Librate, he saw his daughter, Bas, Brate, Dahavas Atziva, that she was sad. Omar lo, so he said to her, Biti, Limai Atzives, why are you sad? Omrole, so she said to him, Kli shel chemetz, a vessel of vinegar, nischalefli, got confused by me, bechli shel shemen, with a vessel of oil. V'hidlakti mimenu er l'Shabbos, and I used the vinegar to light a candle for Shabbos, which means it's going to go out in a minute. Amar lo, so Rabbi Hanina ben Deisa said to his daughter, Biti, mai ichpat loch? What difference does it make to you? Why should you care? Mi she'omar lashemen v'yidlik, he who told oil to burn, hu yema lachemetz v'yidlik, he will tell the vinegar to burn. Tana, we learned, we were told, that hoya delek, that candle burned, v'helech kol hayem kulei. Not only the night of Friday, but it lasted a whole Shabbos, ad sheheviu mimenu ur lahavdalah, until they used that light for the Havdalah. Until after Shabbos. What is this telling us? Not just that a miracle can happen, but it explains what exactly a miracle is. The daughter was upset because vinegar doesn't burn. What did her father say to her? Why does vinegar not burn?
It's not your problem.
Why does vinegar not burn? Why does oil burn? So naturally we would say it is the nature of oil to burn, it is not the nature of vinegar to burn. But what does that mean? When you say it is the nature, what do you mean?
Hashem created it that way.
You mean that's the way it is. You didn't explain anything. Why does oil burn? Oh, it's natural. Which is exactly like saying, I don't know. Right? When you say it is nature, you're saying, I don't know. Just is.
The purpose of its creation. That's its essence.
Which means oil doesn't burn. God tells it to burn, so it burns. So what do we learn from this? It's not just that God tells oil to exist. It also has to tell it what to do. So that's like space and time. That it exists, that's space. Whether it burns or not, that's a matter of time. It's an event. An event can change. It's fluid. So God tells oil to burn. If he doesn't tell it to burn, it won't. God tells vinegar not to burn. If he tells it to burn, it'll burn. So when the vinegar burned, was that a miracle?
It's the same miracle that when oil burns.
So you can either say everything's a miracle, or you can say nothing's a miracle. So again, what makes the vinegar flexible enough? It could burn, it could not burn, depending on what God tells it to do. It's because the vinegar itself has a certain humility. Tell me what to do, I'll do it. Not like, hey, I don't burn, I'm vinegar. Imagine vinegar says, me burn? No, I'm vinegar. And God says, you're nothing. No, every second you're nothing. And I have to recreate you. So listen up. And it listens. Because it senses its own non-existence at every moment. So it's not like, you know how you get this video and it kind of stalls? You know, like it stops for a second, starts again. You know, life is not like that. For some people it is. But they got problems. Life is seamless. And yet, it stops existing and starts existing. So you can say, well, it happens so fast. That's a movie. The movie reel moves so fast that you don't realize that it just stopped and started again. Because that little black thing between the frames, you don't see it because it goes so fast. Life is a little more fluid than that. It's not really like, for how long does it stop existing before it's recreated? For how long? Tiny, tiny, tiny second? Not really. It is constantly existing and not existing.
At the same time?
Yeah.
It's not like stop, start, stop, start, stop, start.
Right. Because that would be really
Hard on.
yeah. You know, it's like the people who don't know how to get their foot off the brake when they're driving. Just drive. No, but you gotta stop. So, again, what does this tell us? Let's skip 14 because we already said that. We did 16 already? Okay. Now, text 17, page 78. Amar Reish Lakish. The Gemara says, in the name of Reish Lakish, Gedela tshuva, how great is tshuva, how powerful is tshuva? Shezdeines nasale kishgoges. When you do tshuva, your intentional sin gets transformed into an unintentional sin. It's reduced from an intentional sin to an accidental sin. So the Gemara asks, V'ha'amar Reish Lakish, but we also heard that Reish Lakish himself said, Gedela tshuva, how great is tshuva? Shezdeines nasale kizachiyes. The power of tshuva is that your intentional sin can be transformed into a mitzvah. And the Gemara answers, Loi kushya. It's not a contradiction. Kan me ahava, kan me yira. When Reish Lakish said that the intentional sin turns into an unintentional sin, that's tshuva that you do out of fear, which is a lower level tshuva. When he said that the intentional sin can become a mitzvah, that's if you do tshuva out of love. Either way, the good news is that you can change the past. The sin is in the past. Your tshuva can change it from an intentional sin to an unintentional, or if it's a greater tshuva, it can actually transform it from an intentional sin, which is the worst, to a mitzvah, which is the best.
I still really don't get that. Like, how
Okay.
you could change something that happens before.
Other than intention.
It's about your intention.
Right, okay. Text 18. What is tshuva? So the Alter Rebbe explains it in Tanya. He says like this: this is tshuva out of love, coming from the depths of the heart, with great love and fervor, and from a soul passionately desiring to cleave to God, and thirsting for God, like a parched desert soil thirsts for rain. For inasmuch as his soul had been in a barren wilderness, and in the shadow of death, which is the other side, unholy, and infinitely removed from the light of God's presence, his soul now thirsts for God more than the souls of tzaddikim. As our sages say, in the place where a Baal Tshuva stands, even the perfect tzaddik cannot stand. Concerning this tshuva of such great love, the sages have said that the Baal Tshuva's deliberate sins become like virtues, because it is through them that he has achieved this great love. So what is the Alter Rebbe explaining here? What does it mean your sin becomes a mitzvah? The nature of a sin is that it brings another sin. Sin corrupts. Once you're corrupted, you're more likely to do another sin. But when you do tshuva, what exactly is happening? The sin that you committed yesterday is causing you to desire closeness with God, which is usually the effect of a mitzvah. Because a mitzvah brings a mitzvah. Here, what's happening is that the sin is acting like a mitzvah. It's bringing you closer to God. So,
The sin or the tshuva?
the sin is motivating the tshuva.
So it's intentional? I mean, it's like you
It's
said,
like let's do a
Golas,
sin
like
because we have-
Hashem, does he give us a
Whatever it
choice to sin or not? Or we have to sin so we can do tshuva? I mean, does he, because he puts ideas in our heads sometimes.
I think we have to sin.
Seriously, we have
I think
to
it's
make that
requ-
choice at times?
I think it's required. Come on, what would life be without sin?
Boring.
Huh?
Boring.
Well, the struggle itself
So
is.
where it says,
that's
I
the-
think it's in Tanya, no, it's in somebody who decides to sin on purpose, he plans it ahead of time. Oh yeah, I'm gonna sin, but then I'll do tshuva later. That person's never gonna get a chance to do tshuva.
Because,
You can't bargain on it. You have to, you make a mistake, you can't bargain on it.
right. Why is it? Why is it that if I intend to do tshuva when I sin, then I can't do tshuva? Tshuva means regret. I'm not regretting. It's all part of the plan.
But what if you're regretting it when you're doing it? Like, I wish I wasn't doing this, but here I go anyway,
That's not regret.
for example.
That's not regret. That's just a damper. That just takes the fun out of it. It's not regret. But listen to this. How is it that the sin motivates the tshuva? Think about this for a minute. You sinned intentionally, cold-bloodedly, premeditated,
You don't like it. You don't like the results.
which means that your connection to God
It's severed.
and your love for God is not very strong. Yeah. But now your love for God makes you want to be better. Where was your love for God when you sinned?
Well, that's our struggle as humans.
So what's the dynamic? How does this work? I really am not so committed to God, who I love, but you know.
At times.
So I go ahead and I sin intentionally. Now I'm regretting. Well, what? What's causing that regret? Your love for God? Obviously not. The love of God that you have didn't stop you from sinning. It's not going to cause you to do tshuva. So what is? What's causing you to do tshuva?
Maybe every moment is recreated, so in this next moment I'm remembering that, oh, there is a God here.
I knew there was a God when I sinned. It didn't stop me.
Doesn't the Neshama want to be
But
corrected?
it also.
If you forgot, then it's an unintentional sin.
Maybe it's being afraid. That's something that happens.
So why weren't you afraid when you sinned?
Too good to resist.
So you didn't have guilt at the time.
Huh?
The whole thing is like self-absorbed, so it's like, so if you weren't thinking about God when you were, so you basically were saying, forget God, I'm in sin, but I'll regret, and then you want to do tshuva, but it would be it's just coming from yourself. It's all about yourself in that case.
Or maybe from your perspective, you didn't really think you were sinning.
Right.
Then why would you do tshuva?
Because
After
you
realized.
wised up.
Got smarter.
Because we have inside us.
You saw from another perspective, rather
We-
than what you even if you think you're doing good, but according to another person, it's not so good. Let's say.
Yeah. So imagine a father and a son. Perfect father, perfect son. Then the son does something really bad, and the father is very angry and even hates his son. But then the son apologizes, and they make up, and now the father loves his son more than before. Where did more come from? It's not like previously he didn't really love him. He really loved him. So what is more? What's more?
Well, he sees that his child wants the relationship as well. It wasn't just him feeding because it's a father or son, but he actually sees the worthiness of the
And how does he see it?
worthiness of the relationship. What?
Where does he see it?
When they make up and the son comes to the father.
In other words, only because he did something bad does the father love him more. How does that work? If he had never been bad, his father would just love him. But because he did something bad, now his father loves him. So that's what I'm saying.
Wants the relationship.
Sinning is necessary.
It's not taking away, but just because you did something bad doesn't mean I love you less. So maybe, I don't know if compensate is the right word, but you don't want, the father doesn't want the child to think you did something bad, you made a mistake, and then the child
Rewarded for
doesn't
it.
love him. But on the
Rewarded
contrary,
for it.
I love you and I love you even more.
But does he love him more?
He does.
Where did the more come from?
It's endless. Parents love their children no matter what.
They say the
So that was before he sinned. So what's more?
Because the son's love was more, because he recognized
Maybe it was tested.
his father's, what he was doing
So-
to his father.
I think the real secret is he loved his son maximum with all the love he had. Then the son did something terrible. Now he loves him more. Where did more come? Where did he get more love from?
From the son.
the anger that he felt and the hurt that he felt has now been transformed into love. He has more love than he had before. Again, how can it transform? Everything is flexible because it has a certain humility to it. So it's actually the anger that increases the love. And that also elevates anger. It gives anger its positive purpose for existing when it gets transformed into positive. The same thing is true with tshuva. What makes the Baal Tshuva do tshuva? The sin. When he realizes where he is as a result of the sin, like you just lost your father's affection, that don't feel good. And that motivates a return. So it's the loss of affection that increases affection. So what causes the tshuva? The painful regret. I don't like this. I don't want to be here. This is like in a wilderness dying of thirst. Huh?
What's feeling it? Is it it's not the physical human being.
Yeah, how do we feel it?
Who's feeling it? Only the Neshama is feeling it. Is that the way?
We physically don't feel it.
I'm asking.
It could be. It could be only the godly soul feeling it. The godly soul that never really wanted to do the sin even while you were sinning. Or it can even be the intelligence of the animal soul, your nefesh hasichlis. So even physically, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to be wrong, even to the animal soul. If the animal soul has some sensitivity. Right. So how does a person change the past? Not only in his mind. The past should be causing you to sin more, because one sin brings another. And yet, because of something you did now, you are changing the event of the past, and now it is causing you to do something positive. That's what it means. Tshuva is retroactive. Like the Rebbe once said, that if you hadn't gone to the mikveh and a child was born, if you go to the mikveh now, after the child was born, it will retroactively affect the child as if the child was born with the mikveh. Here's one way of looking at it. There are two kinds of regret. There is the regret of what could have been. A person regrets, he made a decision, and it was the wrong decision, and it could have been different. Like, for example, I invested in the wrong stock. I should have invested in the other stock. And they told me to invest, and I didn't listen. I really regret that. Deeply regret that. Or I could have bought that building for $9, like Jackie Mason says, and they talked me out of it. Had I bought that building, I would now be a millionaire. That's one form of regret. I regret what could have been. There's another kind of regret, and that is, I regret what should have been. I should have been better to my mother. I regret it. I should have been a better friend to my friend. I should have done the mitzvah, and I didn't. There are two differences between these regrets. The first is, if I regret what could have been, what do I accomplish?
The future would have been different, but nothing. Nothing.
I regret very deeply not buying that building. So now the building is a little mine? Nothing changes. But I regret it. But I wish I had bought that building. Nothing changes.
Yeah, but you learn a lesson, because the next building you'll buy.
Sometimes it's too late, never comes again.
This is about the loss of
Opportunity.
time.
No,
This
that's
is like,
not.
yeah,
Moving
lost,
on.
having lost that time,
One
having lost that
opportunity.
time.
The regret is ineffective. All it does is make me miserable. But it doesn't change the fact that I did not buy that building. Or like Jackie Mason says, so buy it now. Well, now is too late, right? But if you regret what should have been, you should have been better, nicer to your friend. Doesn't that regret make you nicer? It does. So the regret for what could have been is just depressing, pointless, useless. The regret for what should have been actually changes the reality. You are nicer. And what makes you nicer? The fact that you weren't nice. So the past negative has now turned into a positive through your regret. So when you regret what could have been, you're not changing anything. When you regret what should have been, everything changes. The regret is what I did before was a negative and corrupting reality. Now I've turned it into a positive and productive reality. It is making me, I am now nicer. Something has changed. So, the conclusion of the whole thing is this. Since God is creating the world constantly, the world, reality, is flexible. Because it's flexible, it can change. Which means I have the ability to change the past. I am not its victim. I master it. By the same token, I can change the future. I can influence the future. Like it says, whoever prepares before Shabbos has what to eat on Shabbos. Where's the wisdom in that? Yeah, if you get the cholent done before Shabbos, you'll have cholent for Shabbos. Why do we need the Gemara to say that? Why do we need sages to make that statement? Mi shetarach be'erev Shabbos, yeichal b'Shabbos. Well, yeah. And why? It's not only Shabbos. If you make supper, then tonight you'll have what to eat for supper. I mean, like what?
Not everyone realizes
Uh-huh.
that. Not everyone realizes that. There's people who live without a vision or goal of what they're going to get to, so then they're doing the same thing. They're not prepared for the future.
Right, and they won't have what to eat,
Right, so it's
which is what the statement is saying.
it's common sense that people are missing.
That's right. So why do you need a sage to say, have common sense? Because some people don't.
So is there any advantage to, well, there is an advantage, but is there such a thing as a higher path that is still of equal merit, that isn't with all this up and down? Is this other, saying a camel
Yeah,
doesn't
Buddhism.
like, a camel doesn't like a road that is up and down. A camel wants a straight path. So that tzaddikim, they don't have this up and down. And yet there's a saying that tzaddikim will do tshuva. Like when Mashiach comes, the tzaddikim will do tshuva. Is there a way for them to do tshuva? And they didn't have to sin to get there.
The Rebbe was once crying about that. He said, yes, there is a way for tzaddikim to do tshuva, but it's not the same. All right, here's the punchline. The quote that he brought from the Siddur, back in page 69, text 10. Read the sentence and tell me what it tells you. Hamachadesh betuvei b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereishis. What is it telling you? This is an amazing statement. What it's saying is that God is creating the world every day. Why every day? Why not every second? The renewal of creation is visible when the seasons change, when the month changes, the moon disappears, reappears. The day, you see, the day ends, the day begins. So you see it's being renewed another day. You don't see the renewal every second. So when David HaMelech says, you renew the world constantly, he picks the smallest, most frequent, obvious renewal, which is the day. But really, it's happening every second. So take a look at the sentence. Wow, God renews each day constantly the act of creation. Isn't that amazing? But did you notice the word goodness? You see what's going on here? He renews the act of creation in his goodness. What does that mean? God recreates the world constantly. That's really not very efficient. To have to do it every second again and again and again. Can't God be a little more efficient and just create a world that functions? Why do you have to keep creating it? The argument that the world can't maintain itself because it came out of nothing. Nothingness can't acquire talent. So why doesn't God give nothingness the ability to exist without him? You can't give nothingness anything. That's the argument. God has to recreate the world constantly because it came out of nowhere. But even that is part of God's creation. This law, this rule, that nothing can't, God can't make nothing able? He can make it exist. He can't give it a talent. So the argument is logical, but the logic is also created by God. So God created a world that cannot exist without being created every second. Why? Create a world that can. What is the answer? In his goodness. Out of goodness, God wants to recreate you every second. Why? The whole purpose of creation is to have this relationship. How will it enhance the relationship if I give you independent existence and I don't have to think about you ever again? If we really want to get right down to it, why does time exist? Because time is necessary for a relationship. It may not be necessary for existence. Could space exist without time? Technically, no. Einstein proved that. But that's technical. It's the way God created it. But why did he have to create it that way? He could have created space without time. Time is necessary because of the nature of a relationship. Closeness, distance. We are separate, but we are one. You are you, I am me, but can we become one? Change. Without change, there's no relationship. But what happens when the relationship becomes perfect? Like you're married already.
So sad.
Now, ideally, there should be no change. It's like an old couple. There's no change. They don't have to get closer. There's no closer. They're bonded. They've merged. And they can't be without each other. But there's no need for change or growth because they've achieved it. Then, like after Mashiach comes, time will stop existing because our relationship will have become complete. So let's say this again. The reason God created time, which means change, is so that there's freedom of choice. Why do we need freedom of choice? To engage in a relationship. And why do we need this relationship? That's why he created the whole world. So in order to have a real relationship, God had to create time, which means change. For the world itself, change is not a good thing. And that's why the scientist is convinced that because of change, we're basically running out. We're running down. Like, how much can you change? It takes energy. All movement takes energy. All change involves energy. And we're running out of energy. So eventually the sun is going to die. The planets are going to stop moving because how long can you move already? Right? We're running out of energy. And it's all going to it's all going to dry up. It's all going to stop existing. Why do they think that? Because of time. If time would stop, it wouldn't wear us out. We could exist forever. So why does God create time? Not for the benefit of the universe. The universe would be better off without time. God creates time for the benefit of a relationship. And this relationship justifies time and space. Because if space could continue endlessly without time, so what? What's the point? Who needs space? The only reason we need space is because we have a relationship that grows and changes. And that relationship needs a place. A dira b'tachtonim. Any questions left to be answered?
Lots of.
Now the question is, what time is it?
Thank you. Overtime.
Huh?
Overtime.
Overtime. But that's the question, ayeka. When God asks Adam, ayeka, he's saying, what time is it? What have you changed so far? Not where are you in space? Where are you in time? Because where he was in space, God knew. I mean, obviously, he was talking to him. And say, where are you? No, he knew where he was. Therefore, the question, ayeka, has to be, where are you in time? What progress have you made? What change have you brought? Positive or negative?